Okay, starting the recording. Want to introduce Mel KS2G, who's one of our senior members and been around a long time. And he does a really wonderful job over at Ham Radio University talking about contests. And I honestly sometimes have a hard time myself getting around contests. I don't enter them frequently. And I hope to learn something from this all about contests. Mel, you've been at it a long time, and I think that you can do a better job of your background than I could. Anyway, Mel, over to you, and thank you so much for doing this for us.
Okay, George, thank you. Thank you, Richie, and thank the club for inviting me. I'm sorry that we were unable to do this in person. I was looking forward to that. The last time I did a contesting presentation for Linemark was in person. It was back in 2019. I see a lot of new call signs that I don't recognize. I'm a life member of Linemark. I've been a member of the club for about 40 years. Used to be a lot more active in the club than I am now. I used to commute into Midtown Manhattan and Upper East Side of Manhattan, and was a well-known presence on the 8.5 and the 440 repeater for many, many years. Since I've been retired, almost 10 years now, you don't hear me on the repeaters much at all. In my current vehicle, I don't even have a permanently installed radio. And as has been pointed out, I've been doing contesting for quite some time. And it's an interesting pastime, and I'll get into a lot of that in just a while. So let me let's get the technology going here. If I share my screen, okay, it says screen, it says share. That's not what I want, though. I want this on my which part of my screen do I want? I want this part of my screen. Here we go. And then I want to go to slideshow, and we're slideshowing. Okay. I will preface this by saying, as I said, I did this presentation 3 years ago in 2019, almost 4 years ago, I'm sorry. For those of you who have seen it back then and remember it, you can sign off. It's the same spiel, updated to take the current information into account. And this presentation also, those of you who've seen it at Ham Radio University or at Linemark or any of the other clubs I've done it for, it works a lot better when I do it in person, but I'm going to try to do it electronically here. So as you're listening to me doing this introduction, take a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen and write down any questions that you may have about contesting. Those of you who have never contested and don't know anything about it, have certain questions. Those of you who are marginally interested in contesting may have things that you're wondering about. Those of you who are old timers and they still have questions about the way contesting works or how you should operate and so forth. And just write those down on a piece of paper. And if we were doing this in person, I would be collecting those pieces of paper, but you just keep them by your side. I'll get back to those in a little while. But just write down your questions about contesting, one or two. I'll put on a piece of paper, turn it over, put it on your desk or wherever beside you, and hold on to it. Because what I'm going to do now, I'm going to attempt to answer all of those questions that I haven't seen, because obviously you have them and I don't. And I'm going to answer your questions before I see what they are. So let's see how well I can do doing that, answering your questions about contesting, and I don't even know what your questions are. But I have a hint, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I've spoken to a lot of people about contesting, and I see a lot of questions posted online about contesting. And let's see if I can go through all the questions you might have about contesting and giving you the answers to what those questions are when I don't even know what they are. So here we go. The first question is, what is contesting? Well, contesting is also known as radio sport. You may hear that terminology every now and again. And basically, contesting is competitive amateur radio operating. And what do we mean by competitive? The idea behind every contest boils down to just a couple of concepts. And it's that you want to work as many stations as possible in as many places as possible, as quickly as possible. As many stations, as many places, fast as you can, given a limited period of time. That's what all contests come out to be. But there's much more to it than that. Before we get into that, here's a question I get all the time saying, contesting, who cares? I don't care about contesting. How popular is contesting? Or most people say, you know, maybe contesting is too popular. I'm not sure. Let's take a look at some statistics over the course of a long time. Here's a graph that shows the number of entries in what are known as the Big Five HF contests. That's the ARRL DX, the CQ Worldwide DX, the CQ Worldwide WPX, the DARK contest out of Germany, the JARL contest out of Japan. And this is the number of entries in those contests from 1996 to 2010 in all modes. And here's the graph. If you look down here at the bottom of the graph, if I can find my mouse, there it is. Down here in 1996, you'll see that the total number of log entries, total number of people who entered those contests cumulatively is about 18,000. Now we go across all these years and we come up to 2010. And by 2010, the 18,000 entries has jumped to 50,000 over the course of those years. But people say, yeah, Mel, but that was like 2020 and 2010. That's like, 12 years ago. What about now? Well, I don't have the comparable statistics for all of those contests, but I do have the statistics for what's most people say is the most popular contests on the HF band. These are the CQ Worldwide single sideband and CW contests. If you look at these statistics from 2016 to 2021, you can see back even in 2016, there were about 8,300 entries in the CW contest and about 7,500 entries into the sideband contest. So back here in 2000, there were 50,000 entries in all 5 contests. Now here, in just this one contest, two runnings of it for phone and CW, there are more than 15,000 entries in just that one contest. Now we move up to the most recent time. If you look at 2021, I don't yet have the statistics for 2022, but now in 2021, in this single contest in both modes, you have 9,000 in sideband, almost 10,000 in sideband, and 8,600, almost 9,000 in CW. So between the two of these modes in this single contest, you have about 18,000 entries, right? 50,000 entries in 5 contests, 20,000 entries in just one contest. Contesting is a really popular pastime among the amateur radio community. So as someone alluded to earlier, what class of license do you need to be a contester? Well, all amateur radio licensees can participate in contests. What about the novices and technicians? There are still a handful of novices out there. It's they no longer issue novice licenses, but anyone who has a novice license can renew it. And of course, technicians are very numerous in the amateur radio community. There are contests in VHF and UHF bands for novices and technicians that they can operate in. Even on HF, novices and technicians have phone privileges on 10 meters between 28,300 and 28,500 megahertz. So they can operate those contests. There's a big 10-meter contest every December that they can take part in. There are HF and RIDI contests, and novices and techs have HF RIDI data privileges, again on 10 meters below their phone privileges from 28.0 to 28.3, and there are some contests they can participate there. And of course, believe it or not, some technicians do learn CW, and they can take part in CW contests because they have CW privileges on 80, 40, and 15 meters. So anybody can be a contester. And of course, one thing that you can always do if you're a novice or a tech, you can operate in conjunction with a higher class licensee and use their license and their station, and you can be the operator of the station, in quotes. You're not the operator, they're the control operator, but you can run their station under their supervision and take part in contests. And multi-operator contests are very, very popular. And one way you can do that, if you're a novice or a technician and get on HF, is in a multi-op situation. Likewise, if you're only, let's say, a general, you can operate under the supervision of a control operator. You can manipulate the controls under the supervision of a control operator down in the advanced and extra class band. So anybody, any class of license can participate in contests. So how do I know when the contests are on, what they are, and when they're on? Very simple. You go to a website. Bruce Horn, WA7BMN, runs a site called Contesting Calendar, easy to remember, contestcalendar.com. And if you go to that website, you'll get to a screen that looks like this, excuse me, and he's got calendars for every major contest and many minor contests. And when you click on each of these links, let's say on this link for the 8-day calendar, you'll get a grid of the current 8 days of the calendar and what contests are operating in each of those 8 days. And there's a link to the web page of the information for that particular contest and find out exactly what it's all about. So this is one to put in your bookmarks, contestcalendar.com, to find out what contests are on. Even if you're not contesting, by the way, if you're on the bands one day or 1 week or one night, and you hear all this activity and you hear these people exchanging information, and you say, I guess that's a contest, but what contest is it? And can I get into it? Well, this is a way to find out. You go to contestcalendar.com and you can figure out what you're hearing on the air. So, okay, so now you got the contest calendar, you see all these contests and you decide that you want to enter a contest. What do you do first? Okay, obviously decide which contest or contests to operate. And you have to make your decision based on what you want to do. Do you want to be operating in an HF contest or a VHF UHF contest? Do you want to enter a small contest? That's one that's short, doesn't go for that much time, or a long contest. Now, short contests, they're what are known as sprints. They're as short as 4 hours that you don't have to spend a lot of time. On the other end of the spectrum, there are large international DX contests like the ones I alluded to earlier, and they're on the air for 48 hours over the course of a weekend. So there are small contests, there are large contests, there are one-day contests, there are half-day contests. So you decide HF, UHF, VHF, small, large, domestic, or DX. You may say, well, I have a very limited station. I don't have a chance to make a lot of DX contests. Well, you can enter a contest that's just for stateside stations. Or North American stations that are domestic or DX. And then, of course, what mode do you want to operate? There are contests for CW, there are contests for phone, RIDI, digital, combinations thereof. Okay, so HF, UHF, VHF, small, large, domestic, DX, what mode do you want to operate in? So now you see these dozens of contests on this calendar. You decide which of them you want to work based on the criteria that I just gave you. And you say, well, how do I know the contest I have in mind meets my criteria? So each contest has a set of rules, and the contest rules explain the contest. It explains the dates and times that the contest will be in operation, what bands and modes the contest will be operating, what the objectives of the contest are in terms of what kind of stations and where you want to contact them and things like that. And it will give you the contest exchange. I'll explain what the contest exchange is in just a moment. It'll give the different entry classes. One of the things about contesting is it reminds me of my other favorite pastime, or one of my other favorite pastime, which is golf. When you're a golfer, there's handicapping, and there are different tee boxes on the courses so that you can compete against people of similar capabilities, right? I'm an old guy. I don't hit the ball as far as I used to. I play from what are known as the senior tees, and I can compete against other people who are similar in capability to me in golf matches. Same thing in entry classes and contests. The entry classes are determined by things like the power output you're running and the kinds of equipment you're running, kinds of antennas that you have. So the contest rules will explain the different entry classes. The rules also explain how to score the contests, and they will explain log submission. It's by submitting a log that you, quote, enter the contest, okay? So contest rules, you go to the website, you look at the rules, and that explains how the contest you're interested will work. Now, what do I send and receive in a contest QSO? Okay, what are all those numbers you hear and things like that? So each contest QSO consists of, as I said earlier, an exchange of information. And the exchange is defined in the contest rules, and the exchange is explained. In some contests, you give your name and your state. My exchange is Mel in New York. Or you give a signal report and a QSO number. You're 5'9", you're my number 12. Or you give a signal report and the IARU or CQ zones. How many of you know which IARU or CQ zone we're in? I will tell you, we are in CQ zone 5 and IARU zone 8. Don't ask me why there are two different zone sets. I've never researched it. I don't know. We're in zone 5 for CQ and we're in zone 8 for IARU. Sometimes you give a signal report and a grid square. This is what happens when you're in particularly VHF, UHF contest. There are some HF contests that use grid squares because they score according to the distance traveled for each contact, not only where they're located, but how far apart they are. So now you must receive and accurately log the exchange for the QSO to be valid. This is important on your end, okay? You get credit for the contact if you accurately log what the other guy sends. If he doesn't accurately log what you send, in 99.9% of contests, doesn't matter. You get credit for receiving him. He loses credit because he didn't copy you correctly. Okay? So as you said earlier, we hear a lot of numbers. One of the numbers we hear most frequently during contests are 5'9". When I said, the exchanges, signal report, and whatever. Contesters always say 5'9", or in CW and RIDI send 599. Why is that? A lot of non-contesters, you can always tell not only a newbie, but a non-contester, when you're in the middle of running stations in a contest and someone comes along and says, you're 4 by 5 rather than 5'9". That's someone who doesn't know anything about contesting. Contesting signal reports are not intended to convey information about the quality of the signal. They're just part of the exchange. The contest rules usually just state that the exchange is comprised of a signal report and whatever. It doesn't say it has to be an accurate signal report, doesn't say what you actually hear. That's why when you listen to a contest exchange on the side, you'll hear two stations struggling to get the rest of the information, but they're both sending each other 5'9", even though they can't quite get the call sign or they can't quite get the rest of the exchange, but they get 5'9", because everybody knows that the first part of the exchange is going to be 5'9" or 599. Using 5'9" means only one less piece of information to actually copy. It speeds up the QSOs, and in CW, you can shorten 599 to 5NN using what they call cut numbers, and it just makes it easier. Also, if you're pre-programming your equipment to send the contest exchange, everybody knows it's 5'9". Now, sweepstakes is a little different. I don't know, those of you, sweepstakes is a very popular, I dare say it may be the most popular domestic contest. The sweepstakes exchange is the longest of any contest. It does not include a signal report, which I was just talking about, and it corresponds to the heading of a National Traffic System radiogram. Those of you who are old timers or part of NTS still, the exchange in sweepstakes starts with a serial number, a precedence, which indicates the power you're running, your call sign, 2 digits to indicate the first year that you are licensed, and what your section is. So when I send my exchange in the ARRL sweepstakes, number 1 alpha for low power, KS2G 77 for 1977, and NLI for my section, and that corresponds to this heading on the ARRL standard radiogram. As you can see here on the left, circle the number, the precedence, which stands for power, the call sign, the year license, which in a radiogram is the check, which is the number of words in the message, and the section is the place of origin. So that's the origin of the ARRL sweepstakes exchange, if you've ever wondered about that. So the question is, what bands, what stations, how much time should I spend? Should I call CQ? Should I answer CQs? And a myriad of other questions. And as the late, great George Harrison sang in a well-known song, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. But random operating can be fun. I think it's better to have goals, strategies, and tactics going into each contest. So the goal is your objective of contest operation. Strategy is the plan you have for accomplishing your goal, and tactics are the procedures or the maneuvers you're going to use to implement your plan. Let's talk about goals and strategies. Like allergies will stop running my nose. That would be great. Okay, so what's your objective? Well, your objective can be, I'm just in there for the highest score, or I just want to make a certain number of QSOs. I do this a lot in contests. I'm not ready to spend the whole contest time. I have other obligations during the contest period. Said I'm in for 100 Qs. That's it. I operate till I hit 100 contacts and I'm out. Or in some contests, I just want to go for a certain number of multipliers. Let's say in sweepstakes, the multipliers are the ARRL and Canadian sections. So I'm going after a clean sweep. I want all of the multipliers in sweepstakes. I get all the multipliers and I'm done. Don't care about how many QSOs it takes me. Maybe I'm looking for specific countries. I'm looking to fill out my DXCC tallies. So I'm in the contest just looking for countries. Doesn't matter how many QSOs they make. I'm not looking for a lot of QSOs. I'm just looking to find the countries I need for DXCC. I'm looking to finish worked all states or 5-band worked all states. Or maybe I'm looking to up my prefix total for the prefix awards, or grid squares, because I'm looking for a grid squares award. Or I'm just in there to have fun. I'm just in there to make a few QSOs and give people some points. I hear this a lot at the end of a lot of QSOs, particularly where there are serial numbers. You'll be in the last couple hours of the QSO and you work somebody and he gives you number 12. It means he just got on. Why is he got on? There's only like an hour and a half to go in the contest. He's just in there to make some contacts for whatever reasons he may have or she may have, and to give points to the people who are looking for points. So now what's your plan for achieving these goals? Well, you have to decide your entry category. And as I said earlier, there are multiple entry categories. You can enter as a single operator, or you can be part of a multi-op group. You can, depending on the contest, if it's an all-band contest, maybe you're going to only operate one single band or all band. Single mode, all mode, mix of both. In the 10-meter contest, I said earlier, you can operate phone or CW, or phone and CW. Are you going to operate assistance? That is, you're going to use spotting networks. The contests have various rules about whether or not you should use assistance, whether you use the spotting networks, and if you do, what class of entry that puts you in. And then what power level. I have a 100-watt station. Never owned an amplifier. I have a 100-watt station. I have a 3-element, 4-element tri-bander on my roof and a wire antenna. There are categories for that in the CQ contest. There's a category of what's called TB wires. That means you operate the 5 bands using just one tri-band antenna and wire antennas. And then how many hours of operation do you want to put? How much time do you want to put in? It's a 48-hour contest. Are you going to, get the Iron Butt Award and put in as many hours as you want? Or are you going to go out Saturday night and have a good time and get a couple of drinks and not worry about contesting for Saturday night? And then what times of day you're going to operate? Again, depending on what the contest situation is, will determine what the hours of operation were. This past weekend was a bunch of state QSO parties. I'll talk about those in a little bit. But the New England QSO party is one I like to operate in. And the thing about it is, as an out of area, non-New England station, your objective, the contest goal is to operate as many stations in New England as you can. Well, there's not much to do during the day from Long Island to operate New England. All the New England stations, which are trying to work as many states as possible, they're up on 10, 15, and 20 meters. And from Long Island, think about it, during the day on a Saturday afternoon, 10, 15, and 20 meters, you're too far away from New England, except maybe the extreme southern part of Connecticut, to operate ground wave. And you're too far away. You're too far away for ground wave, and you're too close in for skip. In other words, you listen to 20 meters, and you'll hear stations, as I did, in like the Midwest, working these stations in New England, and you don't hear the New England stations because that you're not in that skip zone. So how many hours of operation, what times of day you operate. All right, tactically, what are the tactics? Well, you can run. Running is where you call CQ and you wait for stations to come to you. The mirror image of running is search and pounce. You tune the bands and you look for stations that are calling CQ and you call them. So those are the two major tactical decisions of any contest. But then there's the question, as I said earlier, what bands you want to be on at what times of day. And if you're in a multi-band or multi-mode contest, do you want to stay on the particular mode or band that you're on? Again, I'll use the New England QSO party as an example. It's both phone and CW, and it's a mixture of both. If you operate both modes, you want to get contacts in both modes. So if I was on and I was running some stations or working some stations on 40 meters on phone and I ran out of stations, I can switch down to CW and try to find some stations on 40 CW. And then there's the QSO value of something called multipliers, and I'm going to explain multipliers in just a moment. So these are the tactical decisions that you make when you operate a contest. And then again, as I said, is the on and off times and the band choices that you make. So the question is band choices. How do I know which band to use? How many of you are old enough, as I am, to remember these? These are propagation charts, for those of you who are not familiar with these. And they used to appear every month, initially in monochrome, in QST. And they give you a graphical representation of what the propagation is from any particular location that you're in to another location. So looking at the upper left corner, you can see this is the graph for the propagation from the East Coast to the Caribbean. On the vertical axis is the frequency in megahertz, and on the horizontal axis is the time in UTC. And the upper two lines, the green line, the red line, are the maximum points at which you can expect propagation to those locations. So that you can see in that graph that sometime around 1400 UTC is the best time to operate the Caribbean in the time frame in which this graph represents, the month in which it represents. And you can see that the top two bands are above 20 meters and up to 10 meters, 28 megahertz. So these used to be published in QST, and then for a while they were on the ARRL website, and a while back they discontinued them altogether because they're gross estimates of propagation, on a monthly basis and ahead of time. Remember, when they were in the magazine, the lead time was something like 60 days ahead of print time. So they were kind of like prognosticating ahead more than 2 months and what the propagation would be like in a full month. So these have gone by the wayside because we have much better propagation tools now. We have lots of online propagation tools. You can find them all over the internet. If you've ever seen my presentation on HF operating, I talk a little bit more detail about propagation tools. This is one that's really interesting. It's on dxmaps.com. And what you do is along the top edge of the map, you can see that there are the different frequency bands at this point in time that I took this picture a while ago. I clicked on 40 meters and it's showing me in real time what the propagation looks like. Each of those lines represents a QSO being conducted from point A to point B. And as you can see, at this point in time and at 40 meters, let me just back up here to where it is so I can point it out to you. Lots of QSOs going on, domestically, stateside, quite a few QSOs going on from North America into Europe, quite a few going on from North America into South America, almost nothing going on out here going toward the Pacific and Asia, very little going on to Africa at all, nothing at all to Southern Africa. And this is basically in real time. So you can look at these kind of tools and see what's actually going on. Or another way of real time with, if you have a modern transceiver, you can turn on your radio and look at your waterfall and see what the band looks like. When I took this shot of my waterfall on 20 meters at about 1800 UTC one day. I think this might have been during a contest. I'm not sure when I took it, but as you can, this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon local time, and you can see what's going on here. Down here, there's a lot of CW contacts being made, a lot of calls being heard on CW, and over here there's quite a lot of activity going on phone. So I can deduce from this that the 20 meters is pretty active. And in case you're wondering what this bright line here is in particular, anybody want to guess? If you were in person, your hands would go up and that's FT8. That's what's going on over there. These are all CW. This might be RIDI, but possibly FT4 or something like that. This is FT8. This is all phone up here. And if you have a radio with a waterfall, you can look at this in real time. When I'm operating a contest and my rate is slowing down a particular band and say, well, I want to switch to another band, I will quickly switch up to that other band and take a look at my waterfall and see if there's enough activity there to make it worthwhile. Conversely, if I'm on a band and things are slowing down, I can say, well, which band should I switch to that might give me the increase in activity? I can look at the waterfall and see what that is. So just look at the bands. If you have a super duper radio like a Flex, you can have a multiple waterfalls of different bands all up at the same time. I have to switch bands to look at, if I was on, if I was 20 meters here and I wanted to see what's on 15, I have to switch the radio to 15. Or if I wanted to go down to 40 meters, I have to switch the radio, I have to switch my antenna. If you have something like a Flex, you can look at this all at once in real time, all at the same time. All right, so now we know which band we're on. A moment ago, I talked about multipliers. Let's talk about multipliers. As set forth in the contest rules, each QSO is worth a certain number of points. And then that total number of points then multiplied by the number of QSOs that meet certain criteria. So what are those criteria? Well, it may be the number of QSOs that you have that have the different number of states, provinces, or let's say counties, or the number of ARRL sections. I talked about that, about the sweepstakes is like that, is the multipliers. DXCC entities, number of countries that you're working. CQ or IAU zones may be the multiplier, maybe the number of grid squares in a VHF, UHF contest. So as I said, each QSO worth a certain number of points, the number of points multiplied by the number of QSOs that meet that criteria. Here's why that is important. Multipliers are what makes contesting interesting and creates the need for strategy. Because think about it, without multipliers, every contest will be just a competition to see who can make the most contacts, right? So basically the guy who has, the 5 towers and the 2 kilowatt amplifier, he's going to make the most QSOs and he's going to be the winner, whatever the case. The guy with the better station or the guy who stays on the air longest or whatever, most contacts wins. What fun is that? With multipliers, it's possible for one station, station A, to have fewer QSOs, but still outscore station B. That's why you need the strategy revolving around multipliers. How does multipliers work? One of you may have written down on your question sheet for contesting. Let's take a look at the ARRL 10-meter contest that I mentioned earlier. In that contest, for single sideband, QSOs count 2 points each. 100 QSOs, 200 points. Multipliers are the number of US and Mexican states, Canadian provinces, and DXCC entities that you work within that number of QSOs. So here's the way the scoring works. You take the number of QSOs and you multiply by 2, and you get the number of QSO points. You take the number of QSO points, you multiply it by the number of multipliers, and that gives you your total score. Okay. Multipliers can make a big difference, as I said earlier. Here's station A in that contest. Station A works 200 QSOs. 100 of them are unique states, provinces, and DXCC entities. Let's add up Station A's score. 200 QSOs times 2, 400 QSO points, 400 QSO points times 100 multipliers, 40,000 points. Station B. For Station B, he only works 175 QSOs, but 125 of those are unique states, provinces, and DXCC entities. 175 QSOs times 2, 350 QSO points, but 350 QSO points times 125 mults, 43,750 points. Station B has worked 25 fewer contacts and outscored Station A by 3,750 points. Mults are the name of the game. Here's a good example of this. Way back in the dark ages, in the 2001 ARRL 10-meter contest, in the category of single op, low power, single sideband claimed scores. Here are numbers 10 through 13 of claimed scores. W8DD and KS2G both work 1,122 QSOs. It's a great contest. Peak of sunspot cycle. 1122 for both of us, but he had 139 multipliers, and I only had 124 multipliers. W8DD outscores Mel Granick by 33,660 points. I would have needed 136 more QSOs if I didn't have any more multipliers. Even more interesting than that, look further down the grid. KB7XL outscored both of us in terms of QSOs. He had 1,143 QSOs, but only 120 multipliers. He's behind both of us in scoring. Further down the list, KE5OG, he had 1,189 QSOs, and we only had 1,122, but he only had 108 multipliers. He's way behind us. He's only got 256,000 points. Multipliers can make a big difference. Now, does your regular good old boy Ham have a chance to be a top scoring contester? Well, to finish in the top 10 in your category in a big contest, you don't need big antennas up really high. I don't have any. I've got a tri-bander at my roof, 35 feet, and wire antenna. You don't need a kilowatt amplifier. You don't need a late model top of the line transceiver with the DSP and the memories and the dual watch and all that nonsense. Smarts and tenacity count more than hardware. Tactics, multipliers, things like that. Using a 100-watt transceiver into my 3-element Yagi up 35 feet, I've got a whole wall full of certificates and another ring binder full of certificates that wouldn't fit on my wall for awards that I had in the categories that I entered. My strategy is to enter the right category and operate accordingly. With the right strategy, putting in more hours yields higher returns than putting out more watts. Okay, what information goes into a contest log? Well, obviously the date and time, and you should always log in UTC, check your computer clock against WWV, set or confirm the offset from local time. This can all be done automatically for the most part, but you do want to check it. I had one of my contest friends over the weekend when he was operating the New England QSO party, put up a posting as he was having trouble. He had a new computer, and the new computer was only offsetting 3 hours from local time to UTC, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. There's something going on in his computer. He probably set the wrong basic time zone or something like that. He might have set his computer clock to daylight time, not indicated that it's daylight time, something like that. So he was off by an hour, and he knew it. So you want to be careful that even though a lot of these things are automatic these days in hardware and software, that you're operating in UTC. You want to indicate the band you're on. You don't have to usually indicate the exact frequency, not important, but you can include it. contesting software that I'll talk about in a little while. We'll include it, but just the band that you're in. And then you need to log the contest exchange, which we talked about earlier. You got to get the date, the time, the band, and the exchange correct to get credit for the QSO. And then in your log, you're going to indicate the number of points and the number of multipliers and the final score that you're in so that you can submit the log for entering the contest. Well, do you have to use a computer for all of this? Well, no, you can log by hand. You're going to need a log. You're going to need a dupe sheet, which those of you who go back to pre-computer days understand that in most contests, you can only work each station once, either the entire contest like sweepstakes or once per band or once per band mode or whatever. So you need to keep a track of the stations you've worked so you don't make duplicate contacts. You want that multiplier list so you know what mults you've worked and how many you have and how many you might have left. You want a prefix list if you're in the WPX contest. You need a zone or a grid map to know where you might want to point your antenna if you're in one of those contests that's using zones as a multiplier. You have to keep a scratch pad by your side to note the stations that you're working if you don't quite get a call sign or something like that. Then you want a calculator to total up your score, and then you have to have a summary sheet. And it's a real paper chase to contest log by hand. Let's put it that way. And of course, there's a much better way, and that's by computer. There are specialized contesting software programs. There are a lot of computer logging programs out there, but there are a bunch of programs that are specifically designed for contesting. The most popular of which I think it's safe to say is something called the N1MM Plus Logger. This is a Windows program, and it's free. And it's very well supported. The joke among N1MM users is they update that program every 10 minutes. Practically every time I turn it on, it's asking me to, download an update. N1MM is by far the most popular logger for Windows, and it's free. WriteLog is a very similar program for Windows. It's a commercial program. There are people who prefer it. They've been using it for a long time. They think it's worth the price. They don't want to switch over or whatever. And then there's a program called WinTest that I'm not terribly familiar with, but that's another Windows program. Those of you who are Mac users, yes, there are Mac contesting programs. Again, I'm not a Mac guy, so I don't know. I know about a program called Skookum Mac. That one is for free. There are a couple of other ones that are out there. Linux users, yes, there are contest programs for you as well. OIFK Test is a Linux program, and it's also for free. Now, getting back to the question of, do I have to use a computer? You don't have to log in a computer, but these days, it's practically impossible to enter a contest with a paper log. You got to enter electronically. So if you do log on paper, there are programs and there are web pages where you take your manually written out log and you data entry it into electronic form so that you can enter the contest. So you can log by hand, but these days you really have to enter electronically. So what does the contesting software do? Well, obviously it logs the contacts and it checks for dupes, as I indicated before. You don't have to do that by hand. If you're working a station that you hear a station and you put them in try to put them in the log alerts you that it's a dupe. Conversely, if you call a station and he's using login software and you're a dupe, he'll tell you. It tallies the multipliers for you, so it calculates a running score as you're going along. It tracks the rate, the rate at which you're making contacts, which is a good way to gauge how you're doing in a contest. It monitors the spotting network for you if you're using assistance, and alerts you to call signs that are worthwhile for you to contact, either as new contacts or multipliers. It will indicate which is which. It will most of the programs also have a voice and CW memory keyer function built into them. N1MM will serve as a voice keyer and a CW memory keyer. I'm not that great a CW operator. I don't send CW by hand at all anymore in contests. I'm just not fast enough to do that in terms of sending. The program will include a Ridian digital interface, so you can operate your RIDI contests. With the proper hardware software interfaces, it can control the radios and antennas. It controls the radios. Anyone that has a computer interfaced radio, the software will change as the radio changes. So as you spin the dial on your radio, the software will show you usually a slide rule of what frequency you're on. And if you change bands on the radio, the software will change bands. Or if you change bands if you click on a band change on the software, it'll change the band on the radio or the modes, that kind of stuff. But there's also interfaces that where the software will give you, let's say, the beam heading, and with the right interface, your computer can turn your beam to the proper heading for you. It summarizes and analyzes. Mel used to be in the radio and say words like that. Summarizes and analyzes the results, so you can see how you've done and compare yourself to previous contests when you save the logs. It'll generate what's known as a Cabrillo file, and the Cabrillo file is the electronic file that you use to submit to the contest sponsor to enter the contest. The Cabrillo file takes a specific format. It's nothing fancy. It's just a text file, but it has a certain format for the lines of data that it's basically the universal format for entering contests. And some contest software will print QSL information for you, print cards or labels, or N1MM will not. It's one of the few features that it's missing, and for whatever reason they've steadfastly refused to integrate that into it. But you can take your N1MM log and load it into third-party software, and that'll print QSL information for you. So besides logging, how can the contest software help you? Well, it can show you which bands to work and when, as we discussed earlier. It'll find stations and mults. N1MM has a screen where it shows you on a slide rule dial indicating the band that you're on, the frequency band that you're on, and it uses the information from the spotting network to show you which stations are on there that are worthwhile to you for making contacts, whether they're available to you, whether they're dupes or whether they're multipliers or whatever. It also has a separate window you can call up that will show you a list of just, let's say you just want multipliers. It will show you just the multipliers that are available on that particular band. And you can click in that window and go to each of those spots, and it'll move your radio to that frequency to try to work the multiplier that's indicated there. See if that multiplier is even there, because as those of you that use the spotting network know, there's lots of spots that'll be up there from other people that hear a certain station that you can't hear because of the way the propagation is working. The software therefore helps you increase your QSO rate, and it therefore increases your QSO total. It'll help increase your mult total because it helps you find mults. It'll decrease and eliminate the working of dupes, which are time consuming and therefore not necessary. So now the question arises is, okay, I'm all set to do this. How, I want to set up a new station for contesting. What do I need? Well, any station can be used for contesting. You need a transceiver, or if you're using old style equipment, a transmitter and receiver. Obviously, you need an antenna. You don't need a linear amplifier. As I said, there's categories for low power stations like me, 100 watts. There are categories for QRP stations if that's your fancy. You don't want to work 5 watts or less. If you're running phone, you need a microphone. If you're running CW, you need a straight key or a CW keyer and a set of paddles. If you're running a digital mode, you need a digital interface. And as I said, the software, if you're using something like N1MM, can take care of that for you. But these are the basics. But again, this is the basics for any station, but for a contest station, what's most important in a contest station? To optimize a contest station for the long hours of operating, you're going to spend a lot of time. The most important piece of equipment in a contest shack are your operator chair and your desk. If you're going to sit still for a long time, 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. You want the right kind of chair, and you want it set up against the right kind of desk so that ergonomically you're in good shape. So you don't come away from your contest with an aching back or carpal tunnel syndrome or sore eyes or a stiff neck. It's important that you set up your station so that you can spend a lot of time sitting basically still, operating a keyboard and staring at a computer screen without hurting yourself. The desk and chair are the most important pieces of equipment in a contest station. The consideration in laying out that station is also ergonomics. You want to be able to see and reach all of the devices, displays, and controls you need most often and perform the required functions with a minimum of movement. You don't want to be turning and reaching like this. On my station, you can see behind me, my computer and my radio are right next to each other, right? I sit in front of my computer as I am now. The controls of my transceiver are right off the right arm of my operating chair, right over here. And I don't have to move around a lot. The switch for my antennas is right in front of me. The one flaw in my station is because of the way the cabling runs in my station. The rotator control for my station is way off to my right. I have to lean all the way over here to reach my rotator control. Not optimum, best I can do under the circumstances. Some useful accessories if you're setting a contest station, it's like a CW memory keyer, a boom microphone or boom headset. So that when you turn your head like I am now, your microphone moves with you. If you're not a big advocate of Vox, a foot switch for keying rather than a handheld push-to-talk mic, or an audio voice keyer to repeat your CQ calls or whatever. It's interesting to note a lot of this stuff is now built into either software or radio hardware. Lots and lots of radios of recent vintage have a CW memory keyer built in, and likewise an audio voice keyer built in. All right, so you set up your station. Here's a nicely set up station with, you know, a linear amplifier off there on the left side and a nice transceiver in the middle and a rotator control easily seen on the right-hand side. But if I were setting up this station, the computer that's over here on the right-hand side, I'd put in the middle, right? I set up my station so I'm looking at my computer and my transceiver is off to my right rather than sitting in front of my transceiver and having my computer off to the side. Not an operating consideration, but if you're setting up a new station, contesting or otherwise, it's always good if you can set up your station so that you can walk behind your desk, that your desk is not flush up against your wall. It's either a little bit, you know, maybe 18 to 24 inches away from the wall, or on casters so that you can pull it out away from the wall so that you can get behind your station set up, because that's optimum for station maintenance, modification, or in the midst of the heat of a contest, you want to be able to deal with the occasional tangled cable. Some other questions. These I've seen posted on online forums. Okay, is it acceptable for a non-contest station to respond to various CQ contest calls? And the question is absolutely. The cliche is you don't have to be in the contest to give me a point. Contest stations are trying for as many contacts as possible. Every QSO counts, so you don't have to be, quote, in the contest. You know, I'm answering their QSO waste, you know, their CQ a waste of time because my QSO is not verifiable because I'm not entering the contest. You don't have to be in the contest. You don't have to submit a log for the QSOs to be valid. But here's the caveat. If you're going to operate casually and not, quote, enter the contest, just make a few contacts, whatever, make a handful of them. Make 3, 4, 5, half a dozen of them. The reason for that is if you only make one contact, when the station you contact sends in his or her log, the log checking software, which they use, will go through the log and they'll find your call that one time in that one log. And the question arises, was that a legitimate QSO, or did you miscopy someone else's call sign and come up with that, quote, unique call? So you don't want to be unique, because a unique may sometimes be considered a, quote, busted, miscopied call and not be valid for a contact. But if you make, 3, 4, 5, half a dozen contacts, you'll show up in 4, 5, 6 logs, and the log checking software will know that that call sign, while uncommon, is not unique. So you don't have to be in the contest. You don't have to enter the contest, don't have to send in a log, but do make a handful of contacts so that the people you contact will definitely get credit for your QSOs. I mentioned state QSO parties before. I hear QSO parties announcing a particular state. Are they looking for supplies from only their state? So here's the way state QSO parties work, okay? Let's take the New York State QSO party, okay? Stations in New York State are trying to contact as many stations as possible, both in New York State and outside New York State, because the multipliers in that contest for in-state stations are the number of counties in New York, plus the number of states, plus the number of DXCC entities. So in-state stations are looking for everybody. If you're an out-of-state station, if you're in New Jersey, God forbid, why would anybody want to live in New Jersey? But if you're in New Jersey, if you're in New Jersey and you're operating the New York QSO party, you should be working only New York stations, because they're looking for you as an out-of-state station, and your multipliers are just the number of counties in New York State. So some weekends, like this one, as I said, that in-state stations are looking for both states, contacts within their state and outside. Sometimes you can find that out-of-state stations can enter the contest. You can submit a log. You can also receive rewards depending on the contest rules. So if a foreign station asks for a contact during state QSO party, will the U.S. station reply? No, that's fine. They count as, quote, DX. If I'm in the New York State QSO party and someone, as has happened to me, I'm running, I'm calling CQ New York State, New York QSO party, and some guy from Germany calls me. I work him. He counts as DX, but it doesn't count as a multiplier or anything, but I get credit for the QSO. And those guys, that guy in Germany, he may be entering the contest as a, quote, out-of-state station. He's trying to work as many New York stations as possible, get as many counties as possible, get as many multipliers as possible. He can win an award for, quote, out of state, out of country. Multiple contests, multiple bands. Okay. 2 contests operating at the same time. Can you operate both? Yes, just ask for it, provide the exchange information for both events, and keep separate logs. This past weekend, I mentioned that the New England QSO party was operating this weekend. So were 3 other QSO parties: the 7-land QSO party, the Indiana QSO party, and the Delaware QSO party, all operating the same weekend along with the New England QSO party. So how do you do this? If you're in the contesting software like N1MM, you enter the data from all of the contests all at once. You intermingle them. The software will then sort them out later. The sponsors of the contest have a way of taking your submitted log, okay? So let's say I operate all of those contests and I want to enter New England QSO party and the Indiana QSO party. I send my log to the New England QSO party. Its software will pick out the QSOs that match the New England QSO party. And I send my log, my intermingled log, to the Indiana QSO party, and its software will pick out the Indiana QSO party QSOs. So yes, you can operate multiple contests at the same time. You can also operate, casually. You can operate a contest. You can operate POTA and a contest at the same time, Parks on the Air. Yes, you can do that. Just make sure you keep a log that if you're going to enter the contest, that it meets the log criteria. If I enter a contest that's on all bands on HF, do I go back to the serial number one when I change to a different band because the exchange is signal reporting QSO number? No, the serial numbers continue across the bands. However, depending on the rules, you may or may not be able to work the same station or multiplier on more than one band. It depends on the rules. That's why you check those rules to see how that works. I mentioned duplicate contacts. Here's a question that arises all the time. Should I work the dupes? That's a matter of opinion. And I'll be honest with you, my thinking on this has evolved over the years. Some people think working dupes waste too much time. So I used to be a non-dupes guy. Guy calls me, I'd say, you're a dupe, go on to the next guy. Some think it's quicker to work them than to tell them. Okay. And I'm sort of become leaning toward this more and more, because there's no penalty for working dupes in your log. So why not? Rather than take the time to explain to the guy that you're a dupe, just work and put him in the log, doesn't matter. Also, it may help the other station. You may know he's a dupe and he may not. He may have miscopied your call. And therefore, in that earlier QSO, he would be penalized because you would have the QSO correct and he'd have it incorrect. So you get credit for the QSO, he gets penalized. If you work him a second time, that earlier busted call doesn't matter, right? And I had this happen to me on the reverse of that in a recent contest. I'm tuning the band, I'm doing search and pounce, and I call a guy and he says, you're a dupe, work before. And I tell him, you're not in my log, work me again. Rather than me search my log and see where I went wrong, I just put him in my log again. He puts me in his log again, and I get credit for his QSO. The question then arises, should I take the dupes out? No, don't leave, you leave them in. Once they're logged, you leave them in. There's no penalty. And the log should reflect what you actually worked during the contest. Helps the other station who may have busted your call, as I said earlier. QSLing, proper, good idea. Worth it to send QSL cards for a contest, for sure. Contest is one of the best ways to get contacts needed for various awards. Make it easy for the contest station. Again, I operate a lot of contests. I get a lot of QSL requests, particularly from newbies from stateside. Send the stateside card with an SASE. Make it easy for me to fill out my card, put it in your envelope, put it back in the mail. I don't need to search for an envelope. Don't need to search for a stamp. Don't have to pay for a stamp. Thank you very much. DX cards, you send them with green stamps, dollar bills, depending on what you want to do. If you're going to send DX cards overseas by the mail, do not put anything on the envelope that indicates amateur radio in any way. Postal workers overseas understand amateur radio. They know you put dollar bills and beyond in the envelopes. They open the envelopes, they steal the money, they trash the envelopes, you never get your card. Best of all, use Logbook of the World, or for a rarer DX, use Club Log. EQSL and the QRZ.com logbook are not really popular among contesters. Use the QSL bureaus if you don't mind waiting. The ARRL has the outgoing QSL service for members, and the W2 QSL bureau run by the New Jersey DX Association. You send them a few dollars, they keep your call sign on file. If cards come in for them by the bureau, they send them to you. So where can you get information about contesting? Lots of places. QST has more and more contest information these days. They have a contest calendar in every issue. The National Contest Journal is a publication of ARRL devoted exclusively to contesting. CQ Magazine, which sponsors a number of contests, is a good source of contesting information. Of course, online, it's endless. There's so many places to get it. I mentioned Bruce Horn's contestcalendar.com. Amateur radio contesting FAQ is nice for newbies. K8 on FOX contest library. Contesting.com is a good source, and my contesting tips, K9 JY's contesting tips. If you can't copy these down fast enough, send me an email, ks2g@arrl.net. I'll send you the links. Here are the contests that are coming up next couple of weeks. At the end of this month, CQ Worldwide WPXCW contest. The multipliers in that contest are prefixes. So people with oddball prefixes, newer prefixes, can become multipliers. June 3rd and 4th is a relatively new contest, the ARRL International Digital Contest. That's not RIDI, it's the other digital modes, FT4, FT8, and all the other what I call alphabet modes. Of course, June 24th and 25th is Field Day. It's not officially technically a contest, but it's contest style operating. It's one of the best ways to get your feet wet in contesting. Go down to the Larmark Field Day site, get someone to give you some time in front of a radio, sit by your side, help you with the procedures, help you with the logging and so forth. July 8th and 9th is the IARUHF Championship. That this year it's running in conjunction with the HF Championship is the WRTC contest. That's sort of like the Olympics of amateur radio, the World Radio Transmitting Championship. The WRTC stations this year are all going to be in Italy. So your chance to help amateur radio Olympians operating in Italy by operating that contest. July 15th, North American QSO Party. Really, the NAQPs, the North American QSO parties, are a great way to get started in contesting. They're, as indicated, North America only, mostly stateside. They operate separately as phone, CW, and RIDI, separate contests for each mode. And for phone and CW, they operate twice a year, separated by 6 months, and they're only 12 hours. So they're easy. They're a Saturday contest, midday Saturday to Saturday night. And then July 29 and 30 is the IOTA contest. That's for islands on the air. So that's what's coming up in the next couple of months. So that's my spiel. And let's see, is there anybody out there who wrote down a question that I did not answer? And let's see if we can find out what's going on with you. Let me get back to Zoom. Here we go.
Mel,
Yes, here we go.
it may be good for people who have questions to put them in the chat screen.
Yeah, I see one chat here. Let's see what does that say?
But this is a small enough group that if they want to unmute themselves.
Yeah, somebody. Yeah, thank you. Somebody corrected my typo in that slide. WA7BNM, and my slide says BMN. I do that all the time when I write his call sign. But it's contestingcalendar.com, which is more important, and I will correct that slide for the next time I use it. So thank you for that. Anybody else want to put something else in the chat? Any other questions? Did I answer every question everybody wrote down?
Well, you raised one actually, Mel. You raised one about the signal report.
Right.
Don't you think originally it was intended to be a genuine signal report? Wouldn't that have been valuable for people making contacts, across the country, across the state, and whatever? I'm
old, but I'm not that old, so I don't know. But all I can tell you is now it's not. It's just for contesters, it's maddening for somebody to send other than 5.9.
But it seems silly then. If that's the case, they should just eliminate that.
Well, yeah, a lot of people say that, and in some contests, there is no signal report. Like I said,
Yeah.
North American QSO part, there's no signal report. It's name and state, sweepstakes, there's no signal report. But in the contest where there's a signal report, it's assumed that's going to happen. If you use contesting software, it puts it in there automatically.
I didn't know that.
that you received and you sent 599. So and you see this complaint. You know who this complaint comes from? From non-contesters.
Right.
No contester ever complains that why did they eliminate the signal report? Because everybody knows the signal report is there. So you know it's there. You write it down. You put it in the log. Now you just got to get the rest of the exchange. So it doesn't bother me that it's not accurate.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me that the guy I can hardly hear is going to send 599. I know he's going to send 599, so I put it in my log. So it's always it's the non-contesters and the anti-contesters that drives them crazy. The people who hate contests because we clog up the bands, like it's a bad thing, that 9,000 people are operating one weekend for the CQ Worldwide contest. It bothers them that the bands are clogged with 9,000 people entering the contest. But yeah, I agree with you. It's a lot of people say it's silly, and it may originally have been, as you say, valuable. But right now, in the real world, in the 21st century, and it's 599.
Yeah. All right, thank you. And don't forget, by the way, it upsets those of us who are Virgo.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
Anybody else either in the chat? Yeah, okay. Yeah, somebody said makes somebody said makes absolutely no sense to give 5.9 on every contact, leave it out. Yeah, some contests they do, but it's it's as Tevye said, it's tradition. That's what that's what it is.
Well,
Doesn't bother anybody except the non-contested. Richie, yes. Somebody
Mel, I
else?
was going to say it's a little bit easier to understand in terms of the DXCC. You have a guy sitting on rocks in the middle of the South China Sea saying, was that a 583 that you gave me or a 588 that it just makes no sense. The guy's out there risking his life, give him the 5.9 or the 5.99 and leave it at that.
Yeah, again, I know personally enough big time DXers who've done that. They don't care what their signal. They hear you, they log you. They don't care, they don't care how well, you're hearing them. What matters is how well they're hearing you. And usually, most of the time, they hear you a lot better than you hear them because they're usually not contending with the line noise and some of the QRM and that kind of thing. So it's just one of those things. Again, I don't know what the origin of it is. Unlike I said, the exchange in sweepstakes, we know the origin of that exchange is radiograms. Anything else?
Yeah, here's this question.
Yeah.
How do you get people to confirm? I have a number of stations worked, and I'm thinking of Falkland Islands, which is not the most common place around, or St. Helena's Island.
Mm-hmm.
And the two operators there that I've worked won't confirm.
Well, again,
Any secrets to that?
well, first of all, the secret is to look and see what you can find out about whether they'll confirm or not. Go to the if they have a QRZ page, go to the, and this is not contest, this is DXing, but either way, go to the QRZ page and see what they want. Like I'm an LOTW guy, right? I don't, I haven't. I have enough. I have 4-band DXCC. I need 20 more on 80. God knows if I'll live long enough to get those. But I'm an LOTW guy, and if I see a rare station that's a band fill for me, I'm not a big collector of band fills either. So since I have 4 out of the 5 bands DXCC already, and I don't do the walk bands. But if I see that they don't do LITW, I don't go after them because they won't confirm. So some of them, so that's number one. Do they do LOTW? And if they do, they'll confirm. They may take a while to upload. Not everybody uploads every day or every week, or sometimes it takes a long time. If you're a long time LOTW user, you'll see this phenomenon that all of a sudden you'll get a whole bunch of confirmations from some particular station, not usually Rare DX, but some station in Italy. All of a sudden you get 20 confirmations going back a few years. That's because the guy has just gotten onto LOTW and he's backfilling, that kind of thing. All right, so okay, so you go on. Are they using LOTW? No, they're not. How about Club Log? You go on to Club Log. That's another secret. And you go on to Club Log. You join Club Log and you use what's called QoRS, and that is where you basically electronically request a QSL card, and you usually pay for it. Can't put it any simpler than that. Guys, want like $5 or whatever to send you a QSL card. So that's the other way to do it. You can try bureaus, but some people just don't confirm. It's just as simple as that. You mentioned Falklands and St. Helena. I got those a long time ago, and I don't recall that there was a particular problem getting them. I think I got them all through the bureau or something like that. No, actually, St. Helena I must have gotten direct, because I remember this is early in my days in my ham radio career, and I looked up the guy. I think I asked the guy, "What's his address?" And he said, "Just my name and call sign, St. Helena Island, South Atlantic Ocean. It'll get to me." So but it's a problem. Some people don't confirm. So you got to you work other ones. There's no as I said, secret to it. Whatever secrets there are, like I said, stateside is send an SASE. I get cards from stateside contacts, mostly newbies, and most of them send SASEs. The ones who don't know, I'm a good guy. I will answer them anyhow. I can stand the time, trouble, and, you know, and expense of finding an envelope and a stamp. But I always put a note in the card that says an SASE would have been appreciated, so that they should know that that'll help them get I usually say something like, you'll get a response, you'll get better responses with an SASE, right? Same thing overseas. If you're gonna QSL direct, green stamps are the magic kingdom, you know, the magic. I'm not a big fan of QSLing, you know, direct, unless that's the way they want to do it. If you go on onto QRZ, some stations say that QSL direct, number of green stamps or whatever. IRCs are a thing of the past. Those of you who are not old enough, international reply coupons. Those are, forget about it. Nobody uses those anymore. You go to a post office, they have no idea what you're talking about. First of all, I don't think anybody U.S. post offices even sell IRCs anymore, let alone know how to cash them. You know, the postmaster has to start pulling out the manual to try to figure it out, if at all. And the other thing about IRCs is you collect them. What we used to do is you collect the IRCs from overseas stations, and then you send them back out to other overseas stations. I have a bunch of them. I must have 20 of them sitting in a box somewhere, and they're all expired. That's the other thing. They expire after a while. So, and maybe I could sell them on eBay as curiosity.
Collector's items.
Yeah, collector's items. It's curious. Speaking of that, just totally off topic, QSL cards on eBay. I was looking for something, and I can't remember what I was looking for, and I came across somebody selling one of my QSL cards that I had sent to somebody. Not the guy who's selling it. Some guy must have picked it up at a flea market or something. He's selling my QSL card for $6. Not to me. I got a whole box of them. You know?
Mel, yes. I would point one thing out regarding green stamps. There are some countries,
yes,
where it's illegal
yep,
for people to have American money.
Right. And that's why you got to be careful about, and that's why I say, if you look at like Club Log, or if you look at the information pages on QRZ.com, the guys who want the money that way will tell you. Yeah. And that's, and as I said, there's another, the other reason is, even in countries where it is legal, don't indicate ham radio in any way, shape, or form, because the postal guys know about it. They notice there's dollar bills or $5 bills in there, and they'll steal them. Anything else? Any other questions? Like I said, did anybody write down a question that I didn't answer? No. Okay. Because usually what I do when I do this in person, I collect the cards and I open them up to see if I got them all, which I usually do.
How do you cope with somebody calling CQ test when there are 3 contests that weekend?
How do you call? Well, I ignore them unless I can figure. Well, I shouldn't say that. One easy way is to figure out who they are. Okay, and that is, you look at the spotting network and you see that they got spotted for a particular, who they are and where they are, and you can oftentimes figure it out for that. But worse than that is the guys who just call QRZ and they don't give you their call sign. They're in a contest. You don't know what contest is, and you don't know who they are, because they're because there's a pile up and they're working. It might be somebody you want for whatever reason, and they don't tell you. That is one thing that contesters do complain about. Like I said, no contesters complain about 59599, but they all complain about guys who don't give their call sign.
Or just the opposite, the guy who sends his call 20 times and you have no idea, is he testing for the RBN? Is he calling for a contest? What is he up to?
Well, here's the thing about calling CQ. I talk about this when I talk about operating HF. Again, nowadays there are lots, not all, but lots of guys who have a waterfall, right? Like I mentioned earlier. And the key to calling CQ is to call CQ long enough to get noticed on the waterfall, right? That it's long enough that somebody sees you and can get to you before you stop, right? So that the most maddening thing is you see something on the waterfall and you try to tune to it and the guy has this stop transmitting. And then he takes this long pause. If he comes back at all, you don't know if he left, that he'd been calling for 10 minutes and got tired, or he's just waiting, or he had a problem with his computer. So you want to make your CQ, if you're running, you want to make your CQ long enough to attract attention. Now, if you're running and running a good rate that people are answering you want to give your call sign. I give my call sign every time. If I were working this pile up, and Ken, you work me, and you call me, and I say WB2KWC 59 New York, thanks very much, QRZ KS2G. In my mind, it doesn't, and most competent, I don't know what the word contesters will tell you, giving your call sign does not slow you down, even if you have a longer call sign, right? It doesn't take really any more time in your rate to give your call sign rather than to say QRZ, right? I could say QRZ 3 characters. I could say KS2G 4 characters. Not gonna make a difference. So call CQ long enough to attract attention, but not so long, like you said, Ken. I have had that happen. Guys calling CQ. I want to work, and he gives his call sign. I want to work. He doesn't stop. I said, I'm trying to work a rate here. I'm not going to wait. And it's the other question, again, contester questions, is say, okay, there's a station you want to that you hear calling CQ, and you try to get them. How long do you wait? How many times do you try? Right? My rule is 3 times. I have the rule of 3. If I don't get him in 3 calls, I go elsewhere, because if he's particularly a big gun, by the end of that contest, he's begging, because he runs out of people to call, who call him, right? Everybody's worked him. He's such a big gun that everybody's worked him. So particularly in the early hours of a contest, it makes no sense to spend time sitting on a multiplier for any length of time, unless it's likely that multiplier is going to disappear, that propagation is going to change in such a way that you're not likely to get them later on. But if I hear a guy someplace in Europe or the Middle East or South America, and he's got a big pileup running, and he's fairly rare but not terribly rare, 3 calls, I don't get him. He's not. My conclusion is he's not hearing me. I'm not going to break that pile up. I can better use my time going elsewhere. This is where the software comes in. As I told you look at the software and you say, what's my rate and what's my multiplier total? The software computes the value of a multiplier in terms of additional QSOs. In other words, 1 multiplier is worth 1.4 QSOs, right? So I'm better off spending time, getting 2 QSOs than 1 multiplier. So that's what software does for you in terms of strategy, things like that. That's where it can be useful. And as I said, if I'm running and I have a rate and I'm doing 60 an hour or 75 an hour, and I'm dropping down to like 30 an hour or less, that's when I click the button and look at my waterfall and say, wait a minute, is there another band I should be on? If it's multi-mode, is there another mode I should be going down to? Right? In the NAQP, as I said, I'm on 40 meters. I run out of people to work on phone, right? I click on all of the spots. I click on the waterfall. There's nobody new to work. I say, well, what's going on down on CW? I moved down there. That's what the technology is. The technology of contesting has really changed dramatically since I started back in the 70s. It used to be the way I described in that slide. I used to have a log sheet and a dupe sheet and a scratch pad and a multiplier sheet and all this kind of stuff. My first experience, or one of my first experiences in contesting, was the Syosset High School Amateur Radio Club Syosset High School had a very active amateur radio club. And when I was a newbie, I came across these kids, because I worked early mornings at CBS Radio, and in the afternoon I was on the air, and I came across these kids who were on after school on the air, and I got friendly with a couple of them on the air, and I actually met a couple of them, and one of them said to me, we operate contests at the school, but we need adult chaperones. Would you be willing to come to the school for part of a weekend and sit with us and be our adult chaperone. This is before the days of all the insurance and other, nonsense that Richie was talking about earlier. I said, sure. And that was my first experience with contesting. And what they do is they had contesting operating teams. They had 3 people. They had an operator, they had a logger, and they had a duper, right? So the operator would, when they were not running, would tune the bands and hear a call sign and call out the call sign. And the duper would look at the dupe sheet, which they kept on a big piece of oak tag, and say good or no good. If it was good, they'd work them. And once they worked them, the guy or gal who was doing the log would put them in the log, and the duper would put that station on the dupe sheet. But that's the way you had to do it. And when the technology started coming along, that there were other ways to do this, I started to glom onto them. I had at one point before the days of digital voice cues, I fooled around with tape recorders and loops to call CQ, stuff like that. But it was really a paper chase to do contest logging and the paperwork involved. After the contest was over, it used to take like half a day to straighten out your paperwork, make sure the log was okay, total up the number of multipliers, do the computations. Now you finish the contest, you press a couple of buttons on the software and you're done, right? It generates the log. You can send the log in automatically, and you'll see this with contest operators. If you're an LOTW user, particularly among the RIDI contesters, because the RIDI guys, they're all digital guys, they're all computer guys and gals. And what happens is you submit your log, you send it to LOTW. Within an hour of the contest, you got confirmations on LOTW because people have sent in their log. That's how quick you can do it. Anything else I can tell you?
Yeah, Mel, I've got a question that
Go
you
ahead,
did
Harry.
not touch upon.
Go ahead.
What is a sprint and how do they work?
The sprint are really interesting, some would say aggravating contests. They run on Saturday afternoons, evenings for 4 hours. Okay, they're only 4 hours long. And they have this unique format is you can't sit and run a frequency. You can't hold a frequency. So here's the way it works, only 4 hours long. I call CQ, right? Harry, you answer me. I log your Q, so I have to leave that frequency. I can only work one station that answers my CQ. In turn, you get to take over that frequency and call CQ. You work another station, you work Ken, WB2KWC, you now have to leave that frequency and Ken gets to call CQ on it. It's a really crazy, interesting, crazy format because being a big gun doesn't help you because you can't sit on a frequency and run a lot of stations, right? So
everybody's doing search and pounce.
No, everybody is doing either search and pounce or looking for a frequency to call CQ on, right? So I call CQ, you answer me. I have to leave that frequency. I can either find a station calling CQ, answer him and get that frequency, or I can find a clear frequency and call CQ. And then somebody else answers me and gets that frequency.
So are you logging the specific frequency and not just the band in that
You're
case?
you're logging. I don't know what their software does. Again, I guess it's safe to say everybody who does Sprint uses logging software, and the logging software has the exact frequency that's shown on your radio when your radio is interfaced.
Right.
So it shows. So I don't know if they check or not, but you never hear anybody running because that's the way the contest works. Nobody, as soon as I call CQ and get a contact, I can't call CQ again because that's not the way the contest works. No one's going to answer me, right? And more important, the guy who answered me, he's supposed to get the frequency. I'm supposed to say your frequency and go bye-bye. I can't just sit there and call again. So that's the way it works. I don't know if they're log checking actually. And the sprints, they're more popular on CW for some reason than sideband. Having once entered a sprint, I found it interesting, but I don't like it a lot. And it's usually Saturday, like I said, Saturday afternoon, evenings when I'm busy with other things most week, and they're not major events. And I get solicitations from the guys who are running the sideband sprints are always looking for participants. But it's an interesting format. As I said, there are other interesting formats. There's a RIDI contest called Macrothin, and point values of the QSOs are based on the distance of the contact, because I think you give you grid, if I remember correctly, you give you grid squares. Yeah, I think you give you grid square, and the log checking software has a way of computing the distance. So you don't know the value, the point value of individual QSOs, because it depends on how far away they are. You can guess, farther away. That's another thing in terms of point values in contests, right? In many contests that are, let's say, multi-mode, they're phone and CW. CW contacts in terms of points are always worth more than phone contacts. So so for instance, New England QSO party, phone contacts are worth 1 point, CW contacts are worth 2 points. So again, this becomes part of your strategy. Do you want to work more phone contacts, or do you want to try to find some CW contacts? Again, it's a strategic question. The same thing with bands in multi-band contests. The low bands are usually worth more points than the higher bands, right? So that a DX contact on 40 meters may be worth 5 points, when a DX contact on 20 meters may only be worth like 3 points, something like that. So these are all the things that I said earlier enter in the whole question of strategies. Anything else, guys? Well, I hope that that this has been, educational. So I always find it a lot of fun. I like doing it. Like I said, I'm sorry that I can't do it. It's more entertaining in person, I think.
This was great, though. I have to say, this was really
Thank you. For those of you who are interested, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me directly, KS2G at ARRL.net. If you want to review the basics of this presentation, or see a version of it, again, I don't know what you're going to do with this recording, but the version that I did this past January at HRU is on the HRU YouTube channel. You can see that. You can see my HF presentation there. Tom Karuba, KA2D, did a very nice presentation on logging software, not particularly contest logging, but HF logging software in general. There's in the middle of my HF operating presentation, one of the slides has a link to a terrific video put out by the U.S. military explaining HF propagation. I can't for the life of me remember what it's called here at the moment, but there's a link to it in my presentation on HRU. I'd encourage all of you to go to the HRU YouTube channel. All of the presentations from the past 2 years are on there because it was done all electronically the past 2 years. We are hoping to resume Ham Radio University in person next January. Like you for Field Day, we're in the throes of trying to find a venue for it. We've been holding it at LIU Post the last couple of years that it was live. Our contact there left. LIU Post during COVID discontinued the use of their facility by outside organizations, and we're trying to find the right contact to see if we can resume that relationship or to find an alternative venue for that. So it's not just you and Field Day. We were running into the same issue with some insurance and other requirements for potential venues. So as I said, anybody who has any questions about contesting, I'm always happy to talk about it. Give me send me an email at ks2ga@rrl.net. If you want to talk in person, I'd be happy to talk to you on the phone, get together in person I'm a cheap date. You buy me a cup of coffee, I'll talk to you about contesting forever. That's it. Richie?
Well,